This Equipment World video is brought to you by Chevron Delo 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Equipment World. You're watching The Dirt, and today we're going to recover a topic that we've done in the past. We're going to talk about suicide prevention again. Why? Well, because as we discussed in last time's episode, the suicide rate in our industry is 4 times the national average. And what are we doing about that as an industry? Not a lot. Let me ask you this, as a contractor, if I were to smoke a joint and show up on the job site to run the excavator for my underground crew, swinging down a 20,000-pound structure over the heads of my guys in the trench, would you be comfortable with me getting in the cab? Of course not. No one would. In their right mind, no one would be comfortable with me getting in that cab and swinging that structure over my guys in the hole. And yet, if I were to approach my foreman or superintendent and talk about how my wife had decided to leave me last night, and I was really having a hard day, and I don't think I'm in the mindset to be running the hoe today, would you be okay letting me take the day off while you find someone else to sit in that seat? Or would there be a little bit of a negative tone on me not getting in that seat? That's a problem. That is a real problem in our industry. The way that we handle those conversations are very different than the first scenario I talked about, where you would be yelling at me to get off of the job site. It's a very different conversation when it comes to mental health. So here today with me is Michelle Walker, and she is, and I have to check my notes to make sure I get this right, she is with the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, and she's going to talk to us today about mental health in the trades and some resources that you as an employer can utilize to help your employees when it comes to suicide prevention and mental health.
But before we get into that, I want to take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants. Protecting your diesel engine and its exhaust after-treatment system has traditionally been seen as an either-or proposition when it comes to choosing the engine oil that's going to protect your system. And that's exactly why Chevron spent more than a decade of R&D work developing a no-compromise formulation. Now, I don't have to tell you why a clogged DPF is bad news, but here's the real kick in the pants. 90% of that ash clogging up your DPF and then upping your fuel and maintenance costs, it comes from your engine oil. You might be thinking, why don't they make an engine oil with less ash in it then? You'll be happy to learn that Chevron agrees with you. They've developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by 60%, radically reducing the rate of DPF clogging and extending the DPF service life by 2.5 times. Before you had to choose between protecting your engine or your after-treatment system. Now you don't. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology. It's time to kick some ash.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for taking time to be on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here.
So the first thing I just kind of want to start the interview with is can you kind of give us a little backstory as to why this is such a passion of yours and how you kind of came to take this on?
Yeah, so I really grew up in construction. My dad was a contractor, so I've been around construction my whole life. And then I've worked here in Phoenix at SSC Underground for almost 24 years now. So I really spent my entire life in construction. And I just have a real passion for the industry and the people. And so about 6.5 years ago now is when it was brought to my attention through an association I'm a part of, that construction appeared to be at an increased risk of suicide. And I started hearing the stories of why, kind of some of the risk factors. And just hearing some of the stories, it took me back to when I was in high school. My dad's best friend died by suicide. And hearing the stories, I realized that nothing had changed. In 25 years, a lot of the same issues existed when it came to the stigma and the shame around it and how nobody really talks about it, and therefore it never really gets addressed. And so it just kind of compounds upon itself. And so I was just really filled with passion to make a difference. And in the industry, we're facing, this workforce shortage that everybody talks about, and we talk about making the industry a place that people want to be and work. And yet, if we're adding risk to their lives, that's unnecessary. We focus so much on physical safety, and so it just seemed completely necessary that we put the same focus onto their entire well-being, their emotional, their mental health, helping them with situations and issues in their life that might come up that would put them at risk of suicide, that we just really come alongside and empower people to overcome this risk that they seem to be at an increased level of.
And when you say an increased risk, I believe the statistic is people in construction are about 4 times more likely to commit suicide than the national average. Is my stat right there, if I remember?
That's correct. Yeah, about 4 times greater than the average population. And so, and suicide is definitely an epidemic nationwide. It's not isolated to construction, and yet to know that all the risk that the entire population is under, and then to amplify that by 4 times with construction is just really, really a concern.
So can you talk about some of the contributing factors to the high suicide rate in the trade specifically?
Sure. So to start, really just looking at, honestly, some of the things that make construction great and that makes the workforce great. Perseverance, determination, grit, that tenacity, getting things done, kind of no matter what. Those are all the things we love about the industry, and definitely things you don't want to change. And yet those same great attributes can also be huge risk factors when you start talking about mental health, substances, substance abuses, and then the risk that those can lead to suicide. So the real kind of, I don't need help, I'm going to figure this out on my own. Again, that's great when it comes to getting a job done. It's not so great when you're facing personal struggle, a crisis personally, a mental health challenge, all of those things, and that unwillingness to ask for help or feeling like I'm going to figure this out on my own. So that definitely is kind of the big underlying factor. And then you add to that the kind of transitory nature of the work. So maybe people are out of town for extended periods of time, the pressure that puts on families and relationships, them being removed from their support structures. When you look at the physical nature of the work and potential injuries or just the physical wear and tear on bodies, and the just one kind of sense of, I don't know what I'm going to do if my body wears out and I can't do this work anymore. That kind of pressure combined with, opioids or other substances are being used to treat that pain, that chronic pain in unhealthy ways. And then the population itself. So men are at much increased risk of suicide over women. And so, we have a predominantly male population. When you look at veterans that are in the workforce, again, veterans are at an increased risk, and there's, a big push to get veterans into construction, which is a great, career transition for them, but it definitely adds that, additional pool of risk. And then just kind of the risk-seeking behavior of people who seek out a career in construction. Again, that great. They're not afraid of anything, and that's really necessary sometimes to get some of this work done. But that also puts them at that increased risk of suicide, because that kind of fear of death maybe isn't as present as in, some of the general population. So those are kind of the big ones that we've identified over the years of kind of why construction is more at risk.
It is interesting. One of the things that you stated that I had never really thought about before, but makes total sense. It is really common in this industry, or in the trades in general, that your identity is really tied to the work that you do, and you find your identity in that. And I can absolutely see another thing outside of suicide is it's a pretty well-known fact that there's a lot of guys that as soon as they retire out of this industry, they pass away within a year or so. And they literally work up until they stop and keel over and die. And I wonder if that is because their whole identity is wrapped up in the thing that they're no longer doing. I could see how that mentally would be a huge blow to lose yourself. That's I'd never thought about that before.
Yeah, that identity, and then that ties to the pressure, as well, which I didn't mention before, but that's a real, there's a lot of professions where if you screw something up, it might cost a little money, or it might, disrupt schedules or something. But in construction, if there's some screw ups that can really be pretty big. And we haven't always done a great job of training managers and leaders in how do you deal constructively with errors and issues that employees might have, performance issues, and that can then, compound on itself because if somebody messes something up and they're just dealt with only, increased shame, fear of losing their job, all of that stuff, that's just going to add onto it. And the reason that they messed something up in the first place might have been that situation that they're dealing with personally, that mental health struggle that they're dealing with that isn't being addressed, so it really does all compound upon itself for sure.
So I want to come at this next question as a tradesman, as a doer, as someone that effectively wants to do something to fix the problem. As an employer, what are things employers can do to help their employees outside of slapping up a suicide prevention poster somewhere in the office that no one in the field is ever going to see? What are some real material things that an employer can do to have impact on their employees?
So that's why we created the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. So really our mission is to empower employers to address this with their employees. We've determined that that's kind of the best method is your employees best, you're able to meet them where they're at better than we can kind of as an organization, meet them where they're at. Definitely building awareness. So things like toolbox talks, so Safety Week was a couple weeks ago, and it was great to see mental health as a focus of that this year. And so, I got out onto job sites and did toolbox talks with crews on sites, just starting to build that awareness and that reality that the physical safety that we talk about all the time is really important. The reality is 5 times as many people die in the industry of suicide every year as die by the fatal 4. And so we spend all of this energy and attention focusing on fall prevention and lockout tagout and all of these great things, which are important. But the reality is there's this huge underlying issue that's occurring as well that may be even leading to some of those physical things. So getting out there, talking about it as a safety topic, really focusing on the fact that you can't be completely productive, completely performing well, completely performing safely if your mental health isn't up to par. And so really, focusing on the fact that what's going on under the hard hat is as important as what's going on kind of around physically. So that just starting that conversation. So whether that's by toolbox talks, whether that's by, at, company meetings. So here, every company meeting, we address it in some component and having leaders stand up and talk about it. So not just that, it's not just kind of, here's a toolbox talk that I'm emailing out to the crews and I hope they talk about it, but having leaders stand up and say, your full self matters to us, your mental health matters to us, and we're here to help you if you're going through struggles. And we expect you all to watch out for each other. So just like you watch out for each other's physical safety, if you see, somebody struggling, they're dealing with something personally and it's not going well and it's impacting them, speaking up and being sure that gets addressed, making sure that the resources are available. So, vetting out your group health benefits and what kind of behavioral health benefits are there, making sure that there's avenues available for people to be able to get help if they need it. A lot of people have EAPs, employee assistance programs, or with unions, you have member assistance programs. And those are great. Maybe there's, a lot of those are free add-ons to group plans and they're worth about as much as you pay for them, which is nothing. So really vetting them out and seeing, are they worthwhile, and making sure that you're providing a good resource to your employees in that. And then getting them training. So this isn't an easy topic to talk about. It's not something that's comfortable. And especially if you don't have kind of an awareness of it, it's even harder to talk about. So just learning some of the facts, building out people's mental health literacy, the language you use. So saying die by suicide versus commit suicide. Commit connotates, kind of a crime, a sin, and you've done something wrong. Die by suicide, you're dying of a physical cause. That you died of a heart attack, you didn't commit a heart attack. Talking about just mental health, you're experiencing depression, just like you would have cancer. You aren't depression. It's not who you are. It's not your identity. So kind of building up those tools, and we have trainings available. So we use a program called Living Work Start, and it's a 90-minute online-based training that literally equips people with recognizing the warning signs and then helping them have that conversation, asking somebody if they're struggling, if they're thinking about suicide, if they need help. Because again, those aren't easy conversations to have, but just like, none of us have any issue with spending half a day doing, excavation safety training, spending 90 minutes for this life-saving training is definitely shows people, one, that it matters and that it's something that you really are serious about, and that they really do matter. And then also that those skills are something that they can take into their personal life. So they're going to possibly encounter somebody in their personal life that may need help with some of these things, much more than they're going to with, fall protection, and so it's really balancing that out and recognizing this is something that can benefit them in the workplace, but also kind of take out broadly and possibly really help them in their personal lives as well.
That's all, man, great information. Thank you. The next question I have for you is, as whether I have an HR person officially in my office or if it's me just as the owner of a small company, where can I go for some resources that will allow me to kind of create a better support structure for my employees? Assuming one day I do have an employee approach me, how can I kind of set up a little bit of infrastructure in place so that I have that support system there to catch them?
Absolutely. So Prevent Construction Suicide is our website, and all the resources on there are free. So we don't take money for anything. We accept donations to continue to fund the work, but everything is available, no paywalls, anything like that. So on there's a needs analysis and integration checklist, which kind of can take you through some of these questions of, are you doing these things? If not, here's some suggestions to start doing those. And it's a live PDF document with links, so it can link you right to those resources, so you can start taking those. I would encourage every leader, kind of whatever role you're in, to take that Live and Work Start training so that you kind of can start building that your own awareness, and then obviously roll it out to people so you can kind of build out that infrastructure. But in some companies, we're a small company, we've got around 45 people. And I hear small contractors say all the time, like, oh, we're not the big guys. We can't do that. It's honestly easier, I think, in some ways to do it as a small contractor, because you have that ability to be that interface with the people on a much more regular basis. So you don't necessarily have to have all the layers of, if you see this, watch for this. You yourself can kind of be that person, and you can build a relationship. So, we've done the training with our guys. I would like to think that every one of them would have that kind of intervention conversation if they have to. But the reality is it's still really hard, and they're not all comfortable to do that. But they're comfortable to come to me and say, I have a concern about, this employee, this is what's going on, and allow me to step in and be that person. And so having, whether it's, you as the owner, or, whether it's your HR director or your safety director, or kind of whoever you want to assign as kind of that point person, but knowing they're that safe person that people can go to talk to really helps. And then there's just a ton of other tools on there. So there's a series of 6, 5 to 10 minute videos that kind of go through this whole topic, the why, the how to address it, the warning signs, all of that. Those are all on there. There's toolbox talks that are available on there, so you can just go ahead and use those. You can order hard hat stickers, wallet cards that people can keep with them, so they have kind of the warning signs with them and kind of who to call and how to deal with it. There's a mental health screening tool on there. That's a great way to kind of introduce people to the topic and build up that literacy, that understanding of, oh, I didn't even know that asking that question would have anything to do with mental health, but it can kind of start to build out their awareness. So those are all on preventconstructionsuicide.com. Like I said, totally free. We encourage contractors to there's a pledge on there that just says you're going to stand up for suicide prevention and integrate these things into your workplace. Again, no strings attached, but just kind of putting our name on it and building up that pool so we can show the whole industry that this is something really worth standing up for.
It occurs to me in so many ways the construction industry is changing. The dynamics are changing in the way that we think about people and the way we treat people. And this is one of the areas that still, I feel, isn't talked about nearly to the degree that it needs to be. I mean, we're talking 4 times the national average. That's huge. And yet, how often do we talk about suicide? I can tell you definitively I've worked for 3 separate large contractors over my career in the industry, and I can't name a single time that we have ever talked about suicide in the workplace.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's definitely the truth. It is changing. I will say, for Safety Week, I reached out to all the GCs that we work for to ask if I could come do a talk, and all of them were very for it, which, 5 years ago would have been a stretch to even get a couple to say yes. And a couple of them said, thanks, but we're already doing that ourselves and in-house. So some really are. So that was hugely encouraging, and it's definitely starting to move, but it definitely is. And like you said, the industry is changing. We have to change to be able to continue on. We have to change to be able to attract the workforce. And I really believe this is really tied to the workforce, the kind of the image of the industry that is maybe off-putting to the younger generation. Some of those things that we can kind of soften up on a little bit and become a little bit more of a caring industry. My personal mission in this is, I say, compelling contractors to create caring cultures. That's my thing. And so creating that's a big factor in this, but that's going to go a long ways towards a whole lot of other issues that the industry is facing as well. So absolutely, it's part of the change that we all have to make in order to stay relevant and keep moving forward.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for the time and all of this information. This is really, really solid information. I appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for paying attention to this topic, Brian. And again, I just encourage anybody to, reach out to go to the website and reach out to me individually if they need information. I'm happy to help.
Well, thank you again for Michelle coming on the show today to help us discuss a topic that is not talked about enough. Like I said before, construction suicide rates are 4 times the national average. And yet, when was the last time you on a job site either heard a talk about suicide, or you as an employer went out and had a talk with your team about suicide? We don't talk about it enough, guys, and this is real. You heard it from Michelle. This is a bigger killer than trench safety, than lockout, tagout. All of these huge things that we talk about on a daily basis on the job site. Suicide prevention is not one of them, and that needs to change. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope this is giving you some information that will allow you to move forward and help either your colleagues or your employees. As always, feel free to drop comments down below, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode of The Dirt.